well, so you can just describe your work and your practices.
I'm really sorry about the scheduling snafu, but as you guys know, in this space, sometimes we have to move a little quicker than normal, and our schedules shift a bit, and so I've got to deal with a little client crisis this evening. I was actually prepared, a little bit more prepared to talk about government affairs and the trends and where I see things going. I am a public affairs practitioner, founded Touchdown Strategies. We do tons of public affairs campaigns, both nationally as well as internationally, and also on the state level. A couple of the trends that I saw from the charts that they had, which I will still address because that's what I prepared for, was that healthcare is the leading area for investment in terms of government affairs, and that's even split out into healthcare as pharmaceuticals and then healthcare as services, which I think is interesting because you put that together and it really dwarfs everything else overall. This is for a variety of reasons. One is that healthcare affects us all, but more so, I think that there's just a tremendous amount of advancement in the field of healthcare, in the bio and life sciences sector. One of the clients that we worked through over the last year, which will give you a sense of some global stuff, is the merger between GRAIL and Illumina. GRAIL is a multi-cancer early detection. They take a little sample of your blood, they spin it around, and they figure out, hey, you have these kinds of cancers. Before that, you had to know, hey, I have lung cancer, I might have lung cancer, so I'm going to get tested for that individual, right? And there were only 5 different cancer tests on the market, but there are more than 50 different kinds of known cancers out there. So you couldn't even get tested for a lot of these things. And now you can do it in 1 vial of blood. Amazing technology, right? They were previously owned by Illumina, which is a big major healthcare giant, and they had said, hey, you know what, go perfect your technology. We're going to spin you off, go perfect your technology and come back to us when you grow up. They perfected their technology. They wanted to do a merger, and this is not your typical horizontal mergers that Washington and the EU have gone against. This is a vertical merger. So they're not buying up a competitor here. They're actually integrating their business chain. And Washington, this was the first of this new FTC's posture, that said, hey, you know what, we're going to block it, right? So just daily business activities, and they couldn't prove a real harm to consumers. Ultimately, they tried to push it off to the EU and not take action on it themselves, and the EU blocked it. And so you could see how this international coordination between these regulatory bodies was taking place and shaping force. What we did in that, and what a lot of companies are having to do these days, is they don't have the political capital to handle everything that they want. So they needed to get interest groups, they need to get coalitions, they need to get surrogates, and people that have some ability and influence over lawmakers to really interject themselves. And so you're seeing more and more of that, I believe, as a supplement to government affairs efforts overall, and that under the dome strategy that many of you guys are so good at, and working with the lawmakers directly. One other observation that I would kind of note here, and I will say that GRAIL ultimately won their case, and Illumina won their case, and went to court, and so they have now effectively merged. One other kind of trend that I would look at is there is a case going before the Supreme Court right now, and it's one that I've been working on since the very beginning. It has to do with a little fisherman, a herring fisherman up in New Jersey. In 1984, there was a court case, and this has been the law of the land since then, called Chevron deference. I'm sure many of you guys have followed this. But ultimately, it said, hey, if Congress doesn't actually write the law, and it's not explicit, they can send it over to the agencies, and this regulatory body now has the ability to come out and say, this is our interpretation of the law. And it's created this real creep. And so Congress has abdicated their responsibilities to actually write the laws to mean the things that are ultimately getting implemented. And the agencies have creeped in and become the lawmakers themselves. And so many budgets over the course have really focused on this regulatory lobbying practice. But if this is overturned, which I'm hopeful it will, especially with the makeup of the court, I think you're going to see a reallocation of dollars moving away from that regulatory side, and then you're going to have to do more public affairs campaigns and create this broader awareness of the issues. And so I'd keep your eye on that because I think it'll ultimately, if it takes shape, it'll impact everyone's business in the corporate regulatory lobbying space. So I know that's a lot, and I was planning on to have a little bit more discussion, but if we have a minute or two, I'm happy to take a question or two before I have to run out. Hopefully that is somewhat helpful information.
So how does your cancer, this company you talked about, compare to Elizabeth Holmes? How does, I mean, because she came out...
So that's another big part. That's another big part of the biospace, right? Is that they have fraudsters in there just like everyone else, and so you know, you have real tangible companies who have, you know, proven their own worth through the FDA and through other regulatory bodies. But then you have people like you know, the Theranos stuff that muddies the water and actually causes a lot of misinformation for lawmakers. So it's an extra due diligence that you have to do in order to educate them on those things as well. You're going to see that a lot, I believe, in frontier technologies, especially in the space of AI, and you're already seeing it with ChatGPT as well, because you got members of Congress having to regulate things that they don't actually understand themselves. And so that's going to be a significant hurdle, I believe.
The case that you're working on that's before the Supreme Court, do you see it setting a precedent in certain aspects, and do you think like the justices are going to go forward or against it?
I am hopeful they'll go forward to overturn Chevron deference and that it will ultimately push back the responsibility of lawmaking to the Congress itself. And so I think if this happens, you're going to see a lot of new cases come up, a lot of new opportunities in the government affairs space where now legislation is going to have to be written because they've been assuming so much with the regulatory bodies, and that's pervasive. I do believe, hopefully, I'm hopeful and believe that this will ultimately overturn, but it will impact almost every industry because almost every industry has to deal with regulators.
I got a quick one. So you mentioned about AI. So how will AI help with the GR and GA business?
You know, that's an interesting concept. And what I tell people is, at least on my own team, you have kind of a Luddite perspective, which is AI is going to take us over and kill us, I think that those fears are a little bit stoked too much. I think there is a real concern about having moral AI and responsible AI and using it. But ultimately, how are you going to use it to increase the speed of your activities? But it can't replace a human brain. It's not going to replace what you know from your conversation with a lawmaker. It's not going to create something new, a new idea, a new strategy for you. It can give you some blocking and tackling, and it can proofread your reports a little bit closer. It may be able to help you spit out some different content. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go in and fill in the details because you know what the audiences that you have to reach, what messages are going to be most compelling to them. And AI isn't there and won't be there for a long time. So you can leverage and harness those tools to make yourself more efficient in your daily operation.
Maybe somebody...
Oh, anyone from Zoom land? Okay, it looks like Mike Alio? I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and I don't know how to unmute you, but you have your hand up. Oh, he's had his hand up for the whole time. Okay.
No, Mikhailo, if you have question, please.
Look, I don't see any.
AI is not working.
Oh, this is just standard tech that doesn't work. It's kind of...
We had that AI.
It could. All right.
Yes, somebody have questions from Zoom, also please feel free to write these questions or to just ask questions. But please do that in the next 2 minutes.
Was it Leaf that made the Kardashian joke earlier? Yeah, so funny enough, I actually was with the Kardashians last week because I do a lot of, I've worked on a lot of different programs, and we're actually putting together an event where they were coming to speak at it. So we got a lot of tie-ins here. You mentioned Rumsfeld and working it earlier, and that was my first job. I cut my teeth doing crisis communications in the Pentagon, and I think many of those same lessons around selling the surge in Iraq are actually consistent with, you know, kind of the best practices that I would say are a stay-hole for public affairs. And now, obviously, we can all look back and see what happened in kind of the occupation period and discuss that. But you know, it was a tremendous opportunity there to work on that and to learn at that level.
Can you also give advice to? I'm sorry. Can you also give advice to professionals worldwide about what they need to read to teach, maybe some lectures to go to profession and to create industry in their countries? Because in some countries they literally create new industry of government relations in their own countries. And then Mikhail, question.
You know, I'm trying to think of good books in that space, and quite frankly, I'm drawing a blank right now. You know, I think what I've always done is if you have a problem, there's so many sources of information out there. If you Google it or you put it into ChatGPT, you might find a source that can read you in further. But I think it's ultimately in just being creative. There's a lack of creativity that I think we oftentimes as practitioners bring to the table. Not every problem has the same solution. There might have some basic tenets of the same thing, but they're different because we live in a complex world that has complex answers to it. It's not always so simple. In terms of other conferences, I mean, obviously, I think the Chamber of Commerce throws some interesting stuff from time to time. There's some energy stuff out there and talking about the energy conferences. I would look at kind of the model that a lot of philanthropists are building. Charles Koch has built a big kind of network of organizations where he has a grassroots presence, he has a lobbying team, he has a media, a component. They have a policy shop, they have think tanks that they work with across the country, and that's not the only one. I mean, there's that on the left, and there's other versions of it on the right. I think really kind of learning and looking at what those folks are doing to advance public policy more from philanthropic perspective could actually bring a lot of lessons into what we're doing as government affairs and working with corporate America.
Yes,
Yeah, coming back to the AI topic and basically the technologies that we as humanity right now possess, in your opinion, will it help us to actually bring in more social responsibility to the table? Because, look at the society in general right now, there are still a lot of people that are passive, right? They shift the responsibility onto politicians, onto socially active people, and basically do not take part actively in the society affairs in general. So will it help us to actually bring in this social responsibility to the table on the global scale?
I think where I would put the social responsibility aspect is you want to find the nexus between what's good for society and what's good for your business, and really focusing there, because like Tom's shoes, which everyone can look at, like they give a pair of shoes away when you buy a pair of shoes, right? To some person who can't afford it, and like that's a great marketing ploy, and also fits the passion of their company. Fine, go do it, right? That's great, and I think they've made themselves very successful at doing that. If you're a former client of mine, I used to work for BP. I did BP during the oil spill, right? If you and that, which was an international public affairs challenge, to say the least. But you know, if you have marketing campaigns that don't actually reflect what you're doing in your business, you put yourself in extreme vulnerability. And I think a lot of companies are more in that space. And so, you know, they were beyond petroleum, but then when there's something blows up in the Gulf, and then all you see is petroleum, that actually hurts you even worse overall. And so I think it's more about just kind of being finding the sweet spot between what the nexus of your business is. Like, it might be good to donate money to a fire department, but you know, if you have nothing to do in that space, then that's probably not a leveraged opportunity for your business on social responsibility. They didn't have a lot of leveraged opportunities at that point. They were doing a lot of fire department stuff versus working with environmentalists or working with you know, folks in the innovation space on the energy side.
No, there's a guy
Sorry.
who's trying to talk. I think.
Okay, sorry. I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Wells. Yeah, thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah?
Yes. Go ahead.
Excuse me, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, my name is Mikhailo Hassan. I'm from Odessa, Ukraine. First of all, my warmest greetings to all of you and to Miss Katerina Darchenko, who really does a great job by organizing such events. And she did the same great job back when she was in Ukraine, because she actually, I don't know if she told you or not, but probably she told you that she was the one who pioneered and championed the idea of building a trustworthy relationship between civil society in Ukraine and Ukrainian government. So this is a very important job. So Catherine, thank you very much for what you're doing. So my remark and actually question would be about political leadership, because actually, unfortunately, I haven't joined from the beginning of this event, but what I really find actually quite tricky is when we talk about political leadership and the lack of political leadership. I think that you know, we have to quote Bismarck, who once said that politics actually is the art of possible. So we have to pose the question: do we really actually do we really can ask political leaders from even Western states to do more than they can in order to support Ukraine? Because personally, as a Ukrainian citizen, I would like to see more support from you or from Western leaders, but as a political analyst, I actually question this possibility, because we have to remember that each political leader bears responsibility for his society, and actually society, his voters has to decide what kind of political leader actually he is. So this is quite subjective, you know, statement about political leadership. And the second thing that we also have to think about media leadership, which is actually also very important, because now, unfortunately, I think that media, TV hosts, journalists, they're really lacking their leadership roles. So I would like to ask our distinguished speaker about this. So what do you think about the role of media, the standards of media, especially in the light of the Russian full-scale invasion into Ukraine? How can you assess this media leadership? Thank you.
Okay, so media, I'll take that one first, and then we'll go to political, because that one is I mean, we could sit here all night and talk about both of these, but I think less is probably going to be said on the media side. The media side is something that I've studied quite a bit. I'm actually looking at launching a new media company, which is a whole other thing, which we'll have to talk about a different time. But the reality is today's media is written exclusively for the audience before it actually gets synthesized, right? I know who I'm writing for, and therefore then I present to that audience, and the audience knows what they're looking for, and therefore they buy into what I'm doing. And it's this virtuous cycle where you kind of get a polarization of ideas, and you have MSNBC on kind of on one extreme, and you have kind of the right of center, although I do believe there's a little less right of center perspectives in the media landscape overall, but you have a right of center perspective on the other extreme, and they're just kind of talking to their audiences and talking past the American people on many things. And so, unfortunately, that is where the media landscape is, and that's a lot has to do with the monetization of media, the clicks, the viewership, all of those things. Because if I tell you something that kind of goes against what you're predisposed to, then all of a sudden you turn me off, and now I don't have any revenue coming in the door. And so. I know that there are a lot of folks out there looking at this and trying to figure out, okay, what are the fixes for this? There's also been a move more toward opinion and entertainment media than true, straight journalism. Like Peter would have known, in his days working in the White House for Reagan. You might have seen a little bit more even-handed perspective from media even back then. Peter saying no. But as someone who's watched it evolve, I can't imagine it was this bad. So, so I do believe that there is a leadership fracture in the media. I don't know what the immediate answer is, but there is a big swath of Americans who I think want something different, but they don't know how to elect into something different from a consumption standpoint. So that's about all I can give you there in my insight. The second part is on the political leadership. I think that's absolutely the case, and there's a rise of populist nationalism across the globe that you can see. And I think that ultimately hurts a lot of global commerce. I would love to see a bit more, especially working with our allies across the country, to shore up supply chains, which has been a big issue and folks are concerned about, so that we're not completely dependent on China to produce all of our technology, particularly when all of the other countries are really developing the technology, and then China's using that technology, and we've outsourced it. We've had a lot of corporate folks who, for various reasons, have outsourced a lot of that to China. So I think that's an area where I'm hoping we can see more political leadership. And I hate to do this, but I need to get to my other event. So I appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you everyone for